Landlord refused to fix my broken heater for months, so I deducted repair costs from rent. I was a broke college kid living in this tiny studio apartment that was basically a shoebox with a bathroom, but it was all I could afford on my part-time job at the campus bookstore. The place came with this ancient heater that looked like it belonged in a museum, but hey, it worked when I moved in back in August. Fast forward to December, and that's when the problem started. The thing just stopped working completely. Like, I'd wake up and my apartment was literally colder than the outside temperature. I could see my breath when I was trying to study at my desk. I had to sleep with 3 blankets and still wake up shivering. So I called my landlord, this guy named Frank who owned like half the apartments near campus. Dude was cheap as hell but acted like he was doing us all some massive favor by renting to students. When I told him about the heater, he just said he'd look into it and hung up. That was it. A week went by, nothing. I called again, and this time his secretary or whatever told me Frank was busy with other properties, but would get to it soon. Meanwhile, I'm literally wearing my winter coat inside while trying to do homework. My coffee was getting cold faster than I could drink it. By January, I'd called probably 15 times. Every excuse in the book. They needed to order parts, the repair guy was sick, they were waiting for a better deal on the service call. I started getting desperate. I was spending more money on coffee at the library just to stay warm than I was on groceries. My roommate from back home kept asking why I sounded congested every time we talked, and it was because I was basically living in a freezer. Then my mom, who's this sweet lady but becomes a total beast when someone messes with her kids, told me to look up tenant rights. Turns out in our state, landlords legally have to provide heat. If they don't fix essential stuff within a reasonable time, tenants can hire someone to fix it and deduct the cost from rent. I found this local heating repair guy, Tony, who seemed honest. He came out the next day, looked at my ancient heater for about 10 minutes and just shook his head. The thing was completely shot. Some internal part had basically disintegrated. He said it probably hadn't been serviced in like a decade. Tony quoted me $340 to replace it with a basic but reliable unit. That was more than half my rent, but I was so tired of being cold that I said yes. He had it installed that same afternoon, and for the first time in 2 months, my apartment actually felt livable. When rent was due, I wrote Frank a check for my usual amount minus the $340. I included copies of Tony's invoice, before and after photos, and a letter explaining everything with dates of all my calls. I even printed out the state law about tenant rights and highlighted the relevant parts. 2 days later, my phone was blowing up. Frank was absolutely losing his mind, screaming about how I couldn't just steal from him and that he was going to evict me. I stayed calm and told him I followed state law exactly and that he'd had 2 months to fix a legally required service. He threatened to take me to court, so I said go ahead. I had documentation of everything, every phone call, every excuse, the repair receipts, even photos of my breath visible in my own apartment. My mom had made me keep a written log of every interaction. Frank's tune changed real quick when he realized I wasn't some dumb college kid he could push around. Turns out he'd been pulling the same crap with other tenants, just ignoring repair requests and hoping people would either fix things themselves and eat the cost, or just move out. The best part? Tony told me later that Frank called him trying to return the old heater for a refund, even though it was completely broken. Tony just laughed and hung up on him. I lived in that apartment for 2 more years and Frank never gave me trouble again.